Whatever happened to the Republic V-Wing, and how was it compared to modern Star Wars fighters? We'll discuss all that and more in today's video. Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. We're continuing the hashtag AskX series, and we've got an interesting question to start off with, at least, all about starfighters. By the way, I know some of you have been wondering, is this format going to continue forever? And no, probably not. Before long, we'll be back to our normal style of videos here. But I'd like to continue answering your questions, so keep asking them. Alright, so today's first question comes from Eagle, who asks, are both the TIE line and the A-Wing different developments of the V-Wing? Are they actually better than their predecessors? Is the V-Wing considered obsolete by the original trilogy era? These are some great questions. The first place I thought to turn was Revenge of the Sith's Incredible Cross-Sections book, and it has a nice blurb on the V-Wing, and reading it you can probably see that the Republic treated the V-Wing very much like an early TIE fighter. One of the newer and more numerous fighter craft defending the Galactic Republic, V-Wings are sharp, compact support ships deployed in epic fleet actions or in defense of fortress worlds. Launched in furious swarms from Republic carriers and warships, these fast, agile starfighters are frustratingly elusive targets, and their swiveling twin laser cannons make them surprising and deadly opponents. Like many models mass-produced for loyalist forces, V-Wings are too compact for hyperdrive, but carry a powerful reactor and two vertically placed ion drive thrusters for astonishingly fast pitch turns. So from a pair of ion drives to a focus on compact, fast fighters, the V-Wing was really an early TIE fighter, with some differences. For one, I really like the V-Wing swiveling guns, although it seems like the TIEs can also swivel theirs, or at least aim them to a degree. V-Wings also carried presumably fairly light shielding, as well as an astromech droid. The Starships of the Galaxy Guide further elaborates on the similarities, saying it was less durable and more lightly armed than other starcraft of its time, but was one of the fastest ships in the galaxy and remained so for some time. Like later TIEs, they also launched directly from capital ships, having no hyperdrive of their own. So how would the V-Wing stack up against a TIE fighter? Well, it's hard to say. The V-Wing really isn't a very commonly used ship in the media, despite it obviously being intended to evoke the image of the TIE with its wings. The Starships of the Galaxy Guide does say specifically, and I found this interesting, that the V-Wing is not quite as agile as its successor craft, referring to the TIE fighter. Aside from maneuverability, the TIE fighter generally has a higher listed top speed at 100 versus 75 megalights, but that's not why it replaced a V-Wing. And you put a TIE fighter and a V-Wing in combat, I think the TIE probably wins, but it's not a slam dunk. You have to understand that Emperor Palpatine and the Empire itself made changes for optic purposes as much as anything else. But the Empire was also different than the Republic in that instead of simply fighting a war against one faction, the Empire now had to operate as a police state against itself. This is something also touched on by the entry for TIE Fighter in the Star Wars Galaxy Guide. The Empire, wanting to standardize its starfighter fleet with smaller ships, selected the TIE to replace a number of disparate models that were concurrently in use. In time, and with continual upgrades to the design, the TIE became the standard Imperial starfighter craft. It is relatively inexpensive to produce, and though often maligned by both Imperial and Alliance pilots, it is nonetheless effective. Although the TIE's versatility is somewhat limited by these deficiencies, it does have several points to its favor, including its agility combined with small size and speed, making it a difficult target for all but the most well-trained gunners. So the Empire took a bunch of Republic ships and arguably chose the V-Wing as their template moving forward. They might have even used the V-Wing except for the fact that the TIE fighter without the moving parts and without the shield and astromech was clearly cheaper to produce, and the fact that the Empire constantly sought to distance itself from the Republic. The Galaxy had an idea of what the Republic was, what the Republic military was. The Empire was supposed to be something different. It was a new order. It was an order which was across the galaxy and which was deadly. The TIE fighter was meant to usher that in. The A-Wing, in almost all ways, is a better fighter than the V-Wing. It takes the similar idea of a small, fast, mostly laser cannon powered starfighter and brings it to the next level with better speed, better maneuverability, and better technology, including most likely a more powerful shield, alongside ordnance and things like sensors. But I mean, that makes sense because the ships had different purposes. The A-Wing was not meant to be used in disposable swarms like the V-Wing and the TIE Fighter were. These were, like the V-Wing, starfighters which could get the most out of pilot skill, but they offered a bit more in terms of protection. So hopefully that answers your question. The Empire moved on from the V-Wing because they needed to. They needed a cheaper all-purpose fighter, and from an optics standpoint, they needed to move on from the Republic era. All right, something different for the second question in today's video. Cure Iron asks, is there a reason that I see so many of the same topics discussed by different Star Wars YouTube channels all within the same time frame? Outside relevant info alongside a new release or such, in the past few months, I've seen a lot of incredibly similar topics cropping up from various unrelated channels. So there's a mix of things here, and I think the biggest factor, honestly, is that there's only so much Star Wars to cover, and there have been a bunch of channels covering the topic full-time for 7+ years. There's going to be crossover, especially with many of us doing daily uploads, and especially with there not being a whole lot to talk about right now. I will say, and I believe this is probably true of most of the Star Wars channels, I don't watch other Star Wars content, and that's not because I don't think the other channels are good. Most of them are. It's just by the time that I'm done talking about Star Wars and researching Star Wars and watching Star Wars, there's not a whole lot of desire to watch more content, especially content that, like my own, covers lore or whatever else. So I do think that most of the double coverage of the same topic is accidental, and honestly, you don't really get to be a long-established large channel if you're riding off someone else's content or if you don't have the ability to come up with your own ideas. Now, that's not to say that there aren't accidents, or more commonly that certain trends don't kind of germinate throughout the community. As an example, look at how the meta around thumbnails on YouTube has changed. When I started out, thumbnails were often full of text. Mine certainly always were. But 8 years go by, things change. The main difference now versus 8 years ago is that a lot of more people are watching YouTube on their smartphones. It's a small screen, so now YouTube thumbnails are instead, at least mine and many popular channels, free of text and instead meant to be very readable. I'll say this, it's not easy being a Star Wars channel right now. Look at channels across YouTube. A lot of us are having a bit of a tougher time than we have probably over the last, really, since the beginning of the sequel trilogy. So anyone that's still sticking around, trying to do lore videos, trying to make honest, enjoyable Star Wars content, they've got my support, and I hope they do well. And I hope you guys are enjoying these videos, because without this sort of topic generation you guys are helping me with, I don't know if I really have the creative juices to go and make my own lore videos and topics, and maybe we just be doing news, and I know that's a lot less fun for you guys to watch. But that's all I've got. Let me know your thoughts on everything I talked about in today's video and more down below.